Ready, steady, J Flex. And my name, J Flex, it kind of, people often ask me where did that name come from. It was the first name I thought of after listening to people like Carl Tough Enough Brown and Matt Jam Lamont. It just seemed to be the in thing to have some kind of something linking your name to, I don't know, to the way you might work the decks, or, you know, that was pretty much it for me. And it was J the Flex. I thought, you know, that works. It had a ring to it, and it was a Matt Jam Lamont. It was like a Carl Tough Enough Brown, you know, and it had a ring to it, so I stuck to it basically.
There's a lot of confusion going on regarding names and labels and all that kind of stuff. How would you call the music you're playing these days, or what is the stuff we're going to talk about?
I think it comes under the umbrella of garage. That's the roots of the music, but
are we talking New Jersey deep kind of garage, like
no, we're talking UK garage. I mean, it originated from the US dubs, the B-sides really. UK cats kind of got involved in it.
When about was that?
For me, my experience of kind of getting involved in this kind of music was back in about 95, 94, 95. I lived in a small place called Huddersfield, and I was hanging about with a guy called Andy J. He was like the local DJ at the time. He played in most of the gigs.
What do you mean local DJ, like youth centres or little clubs? Or?
What I mean by local was local to Huddersfield. He was like the main local DJ in that small town called Huddersfield, and I was hanging about with him. Had no real intention of being a DJ. I was just kind of in it for the music. I really enjoyed the music at that point. Going to the parties, you know, it was more of a vibes thing for me. Living in Huddersfield, I didn't really know much about the scene. Andy J was he was my closest link to the music scene coming from London. Hanging about with him, I'd go to record shops with him.
In Huddersfield?
In Huddersfield and Leeds. We travelled to Huddersfield, we travelled to Leeds, Manchester as well, going to record shops. And I was kind of more of a listener, more of a punter. He was a DJ, obviously I was a punter, and I'd help him choose and select tracks which he and I thought were kind of best suited for the dance floors, basically.
So you were the selector and he was the technician?
Something like that, and I didn't get paid for it, unfortunately. But yeah, that's pretty much how it went. And I kind of got, as my kind of curiosity kind of increased, I thought, you know, I wanted to actually attempt at being a DJ. My first attempt was Andy was doing a mix CD for other promotions that he wanted to get involved in, other clubs. And after he'd finished these CDs, after he'd finished his mix, I'd ask him if I could like have a mix, and he showed me a few tricks and whatnot, and it kind of went from there really. That's where my journey started, like back in '95.
You said it was all about the dubs and the US dubs. What kind of records are we talking there?
We're talking like the B-sides of Masters at Work, Francois K, Louis Vega, people like that. They'd have a vocal side, which would probably be their A side, and the dubs would be obviously on the B sides. And I don't know, for me, I kind of originate from the drum and bass scene. I was very much kind of hip hop, then drum and bass, and my roots were very dubby, very kind of music orientated, as opposed to kind of vocal orientated. So my ears kind of twitched at the sound of like a good beat or a good bass line and things like that.
So you weren't into the big diva thing at all then?
Not really. I mean, I wasn't opposed to it at all. I wasn't opposed to it. You know, I kind of enjoyed a good sing-along every now and then, but I was more kind of beat orientated. You know, that's what really drove me. This is one of the first tracks that kind of got me interested in the scene. That's kind of just like a general idea of you know, the kind of music that got me involved in DJing, basically. Very dub orientated, beat orientated, no vocals at all. And at that time, I mean, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. The scene was kind of very drug orientated. You know, it wasn't much about, you know, drinking your alcohol and whatever, having a good time. You know, back when I was younger, it was a case of, you know, you're doing your drugs, you're kind of getting into the party vibe and whatnot. And that's pretty much where it started for me, basically. I'm a clean boy now, though. When it started, it was very kind of, there was a lot of imports, there was a lot of stuff coming from America. As a lot of the UK producers kind of got involved and got into the studios, there was no need for the UPS shippings. A lot of people they'd go to local distributors, hand over like 500 records to a distributor, and a distributor would probably come round to the record shops, or failing that, you'd press up 500 copies yourself and you do your own footwork. So that's where there was no best day to come into a record shop, because you might have a producer coming in on Monday, you know, with his fresh track, and you might have him coming in on Friday. So if you were eager and you wanted fresh music, you'd be every other day, every 3 days or whatever. Or some people would just stick to the weekend, you know, going out to the record shops on a weekend. There was, at the time, there was Release the Groove in Soho, there was Flying Records in Soho, there was Black Market Records in Soho, and there was Uptown Records. And you'd just circulate these shops in central London, then you'd have like Criminal Records in East London. You'd have various shops. So if you were hungry for it and you wanted the fresh music, you'd have to take a proper day out and travel the whole of London to get all the music. And I guess that's what helps. I guess that's what helps to build your name on a pirate station. You can't just get onto a pirate station and play the same 10 dozen tracks that everyone else is playing. You've got to be shown to be making an effort, either through kind of getting in contact with the producers, or loitering in the shops like what I've done. I mean, I even kind of got to the stage where I was calling the numbers on the labels to bug the producers, you know, to see if I could get exclusives. And that's exactly how you made your name on the radio, you know. I mean, I started off on a station and I'd done the graveyard shift, which was like 4 till 6 in the morning, you know. And soon after the manager realised that I was getting a lot of exclusive music, then you progress to a more, not prime time spot, but a more recognisable spot on the radio, and that's where you begin to build your name on radio. And I think in London, it's not just the garage scene or the hip hop scene. I think it was like all genres of music. You know, there's a big pirate scene in London. You could flick from one end of the FM dial to the other end of the FM dial, and you could probably find in the region of maybe 20 pirate stations. You know, you could drive around London and see the estate blocks and see antennas. You know, so it's a real big thing. It was then, and it still is now.
How did you find your way into pirates and further on?
I kind of got involved in a pirate thing when I moved down to London in '97, just after I got my job in a record shop. A friend of mine locally told me that there was a pirate station, and what I'd done, I tuned into the frequency of the pirate station, and the DJ at the time, he must have been giving out the number for shouts and requests, and I called up the number and I kind of asked to speak to the station manager, and that's how I got in, basically. I spoke to the station manager, said, look, I'm interested in DJing. You've got to do a lot of name dropping, but without trying to be too arrogant and being too cocky at the same time. I mean, I've done a bit of name dropping, saying I knew this person, that person, whatever, and he had time for me. I gave him my demo, and he gave me that 4 till 6 spot, which was my starting point, you know.
Do you have any sort of music which you played back then?
Yeah.
When you speak about name dropping and pirates, can you probably enlighten us about the importance or non-importance of the MC and all this shout out to the milkman business?
Shout out to the milkman, I like that. And back at that time, the MC wasn't such a big deal. The MC was kind of more, his job was to kind of help the DJ, you know, crowd participation, get people involved. You know, it was just more of a sidekick thing, whereas now the MCs, they're kind of an entity within themselves, you know. They're just doing their thing, and it's just an MC thing in London right about now. So it's completely different now to when it was then. Wouldn't you want to be the best at what you're doing? So if you want to be the best at what you're doing, you've got to be prepared to go that step further, to get that extra record that that person hasn't got, or to make that extra contact so you could play in that particular gig. That's all it is. I mean, there's no kind of, I'll kill you for that spot. It's not like going to war. It's just a case of you want to be the best at what you're doing.
I'm just curious to know how the music that you're playing us now, which is obviously what you started out listening to, how it mutated into the sound that is, or the large...
Okay, I'm gonna get to that. I've got a couple of examples. I mean, it started off very soulful, as you know. And there was a collaboration with a guy called MJ Cole and Ramsey and Fenn. This was kind of one of the tracks for me, which kind of started to change the scene, change the sound of the scene, basically. And this was still obviously increased.
Already we got a little bit of a post-drum bass.
Yeah, I mean,
bass sneaking in.
That's what it was. I mean, you got the progressions in the sounds and the bass lines. I've got a perfect example of where the scene actually changed. And with this track, a guy called DJ Zinc, he started producing what he didn't like to call garage. It was more of a slowed down drum and bass, what he was doing.
But I mean, on the label, we got part of the dilemma already. I mean, there were a lot of people coming to London, living in London, listening to tracks like this, and they were like, friggin' hell, where can I get it?
Exactly. I mean, I was in Baltimore like 5 weeks ago or so, and I'm still getting people asking me, where do you get these breaks from? You know, it's still kind of very UK orientated. I mean, you got people all around the world making breakbeat, making techno, but I think what we're doing in London is still slightly different to what everyone else is doing.
But not only, I mean, the whole exclusivity.
That's the word, exclusivity.
Yeah, thing. I mean, you got a VIP mix. Hey, everyone's been playing it, and you're just like, I want that track. And it will be probably, don't know, how long did it take for people to get that one? I mean, ages.
I mean, obviously through working in a record shop, and at that time I'd made my links with various producers, various record labels. You'd get hooked up. I mean, I think I had this maybe 8 weeks before it hit the road. And that was just an advantage and a perk of working in a record shop. You'd get everything first, you know. But this was a landmarking tune. After this tune was released, I think the whole scene changed from this tune. Then you had people like Zed Bias making tracks. He was coming from the drum and bass. He's coming from the drum and bass era, and he also got involved in making UKG or two-step, that's what it was called at the time. For Hero, Bugs and the Attics, them boys, they kind of come, they're broken beat. They're more kind of like future jazz, future London jazz. That's where their sound is. And a lot of the stuff that I play on the radio now is, I kind of like to go across the board. So I'll play like some old school, where I'm coming from. I'll play some current, and I like to kind of educate. My show's called Underground Knowledge. It's where I kind of get to educate people. Okay, I'm completely different to where Tim might be coming from. He's already made his name. You know, he's already doing his thing. And One Extra is like a new radio station. And I think it's what's the beauty about One Extra is the fact that all the DJs involved in One Extra are pirate DJs. We're all coming straight from pirate stations, and we've just been given this opportunity to play on legal radio.
So you're the Corleone family in Godfather 2 now. You're all getting legit and trying to get it sorted out.
Sorry, I don't understand.
I mean, when the Corleone family moved to Las Vegas and tried to get legit, you know?
Yeah, no, I understand that. I mean, it was just a perfect opportunity. And like I said, all the DJs on the station are coming from pirate level, and that's where the hunger and that's where the enthusiasm is. I mean, when they were looking for DJs for 1Xtra, they didn't want any real established DJs. They didn't want anyone who'd already kind of made their name famous in any scene or genre that they were involved in. I guess it was a hunger thing, because if you're kind of given the opportunity to play on a legal station, coming from a pirate, you're still going to have that same pirate hunger, whereas I'm still going out there looking for the best tracks. I mean, there's like 3 other garage shows on 1Xtra, and I'm always trying to kind of be the best garage show, you know, so the hunger's still there for me. I'm still kind of grafting, still calling the people, calling labels on the records, and just pestering people for new tracks. So.
How's the whole dynamics thing evolving there? Because obviously when you get all these people taken away from the pirates, there must be a lot of hungry kids moving into their spots, which are left void now. I mean, it must be like...
There's always someone who wants to take your spot, you know, so when you leave the pirate station, there's always someone who's hungry to fill your shoes on a pirate station. One thing that we were told at 1Xtra, one thing we were told was, don't get too complacent. Although you're on a national radio station now, don't be complacent, because as fast as you is employed is as quick as you'll be dropped if you become complacent, if you're not at the top of your game, you know. And I had a chat with the boss, and basically it was a case of everyone who was employed on 1Xtra, they were an authoritative figure in their genre. You know, and at that point, just before I got into 1Xtra, I ran a record label called Ghost, and we were innovators. We kind of completely changed the sound again, because there was a whole vocal side of garage, and as I was coming from drum and bass, as I mentioned earlier, we were kind of bringing the drum and bass lines in there as well. You know, and our sound was kind of very minimal.
Got any examples for that?
Yeah, this was one of my first releases on my label Ghost. So that was the first side. That was called The Club, and that was done by Blaze. The next track is called 2000.
We lost a beat or two in the pattern?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, it kind of went from 4/4, which was your predominant, like, kind of your house structure, your 4/4 beat, to kind of 2-step. It actually came from a track, Tina Moore. I can't remember the name of the guy who produced the track, but that was the first kind of, and that was actually a US track. He kind of moved away from the 4/4 structure and had this 2-step vibe to it, and it was like a full vocal, and I think that's where the 2-step sound was coming from, you know. Although we might claim for it to be from London, I think that was the first track, Tina Moore, Never Let You Go. That was the first track in which I heard like a 2-step beat, basically, and that's where the whole 2-step derived from, in my opinion anyway. You know, it kind of just changed the scene again. It went from like 4/4 dubby vocal to your complete dubs, where your RIPs were making like the heavy bass lines, the Reese bass lines, the drum and bass lines, to MJ Cole doing his thing, and then the 2-step. So the scene was kind of forking off all the time. You know, people were kind of being creators in their own right, and just trying to make something completely different. You know, and where we came in, we were doing a 2-step thing, but with drum and bass sounds, and just doing completely different to what everyone else was doing. And it was just a case of experimenting in the studios, basically. We'd lay down a 2-step beat, and we'd just try and find the most ridiculous, the dirtiest, the hardest bass line we could. And that's where the label came from, that's where Ghost came, and that's where we kind of really made our name, not for trying to do what everyone else was doing, you know, at the time. That was fresh, you know, and I think we done that back in 2000, like 3 years ago, and there was no one doing anything like that at the time, so that's where we kind of started to build our name.
By that time, and with the particular situation in London, with all the labels, all the media and stuff, that was about the second time around. You had a lot of public attention put on your scene with like the weirdest sort of stereotypes. How do you survive all these ups and downs and like, hey, we all love you, we want to sign you, we want to give you a free house, free car, free whatever, horses and horse teachers, and then, oh, next 2 weeks later, no, you're rubbish. And like,
do you know what I think it is? The media and the record labels, I mean, the record companies, they really mess up your scene. You know, you start with something which is fresh, and you know, over time it becomes more mainstream, and when it becomes more mainstream, obviously you get a load of press, and record companies want to get involved in it. At that point, I think that's where the scene, that was the start of the end of the scene, basically, where major companies would start throwing £60,000 at you, £120,000 at you for a single, not an album deal, but a single deal. For one 12-inch, they'd probably give you like 120 grand. Kids want money, you know. There were people that wasn't even making this type of music, and the record companies they got wind of the record companies throwing this ridiculous amount of money at you for doing a 12-inch, and everyone was making it. It watered it right down. You kind of lost the real essence of the underground with it becoming more mainstream. You'd see that you'd hear tracks on washing up liquid adverts and things like that. And from when you kind of switch on the TV and hear tracks on dry commercials, then you know your scene's in trouble.
are there any songs you played on white label you regret having played them?
That's a good question, actually. I mean, as a working and up-and-coming DJ, if you wanted to get gigs, you had to play what the crowd wanted. So there were certain clubs that I'd play at that I'd have a cheesy box, whereas I'd play tracks that I didn't really want to play. So that cheesy box would actually come out, you know. But yeah, there are a number of tracks that I've played that I didn't particularly want to play, but at the end of the day, it's a case of kind of trying to make a name for yourself as well, you know.
A cheesy name then?
Not really a cheesy name. I mean, I kind of used that opportunity to kind of, okay, I might play one or two cheesy tracks, but then I'd just draw for something.
Are you probably just afraid to admit that you like Craig David at some stage? Or?
No, Craig David, I mean, shit, he's talented, right? He was a talented guy. That's why he kind of broke through. You know, even people like Daniel Bedingfield, I mean, his first track was a garage track, you know. If you're talented, you'll go a long way, you know, and I respect that more than anyone who's just coming in just for the money, basically.